Howdy, folks. So, this is one of the few videos that I've actually gone to the trouble of scripting because I just have so much respect for these guys, and, honestly, they're the only band that I've been able to play music from where I haven't gotten a copyright strike. That may just be because the two members are unfortunately deceased at this point, but, yeah, I want to tell you a little something about them and why they're my favorite duo of psychedelic martyrs. Now, why would I at all be tickled by a couple of uber-gay, LSD-guzzling, Crowley-worshipping, biological matter-flinging hooligans whose style is inherently unharmonious as their devotion to all things esoteric is undying? Because A, Christopher Sleazy and Jhon Balance, or however you pronounce the name he gave himself. His name was initially Jeff. They're not just extremely gifted geniuses who sacrifice sanity and, for Jhon, mortality on the altar of mind expansion, tapping into unordinary states of consciousness by any means necessary. Plus, Nick Cave said they were too gay for him after Jhon decided to take the liberty upon himself of administering a blood enema during a live performance during the AIDS epidemic, no less. What's not to love? We're only getting started here. You see, Coil, you could say they emerged with a pulsing jab out of the filthy ass of their former project, Throbbing Gristle, like a phallic cum and blood-stained sandworm out of the unwashed anal reaches of Arrakis. With Peter Christopher Sleazy Christopherson, one immensely talented and unendingly depraved half of the demented duo, who sported an impressive resume as a former keyboardist for Genesis. Yes, that is true. Music producer who worked with the likes of Trent Reznor. He actually inspired the name of Reznor's latest vanity project, Slaying Angels, or Destroying Angels, whatever it's called. I've never found it personally very compelling, but he was the inspiration behind that name. Anyways, yeah, I mean, he also was a big influence on a lot of the more ambient and electronic stuff that Reznor did with Atticus Ross. And if that's not enough to convince you that he was the man with the plan, then let me assure you that he was also an accomplished director of several nominated music videos. And if Sleazy was the man with the plan, then Jhon Balance, formerly Jeff, was the maddened, tortured artist whose schizophrenia, yes, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 15, and potent hallucinogen-addled brain was the lewd fireworks burning a fecal-smeared cavity into a deeply haunted and dangerously curious psyche within the bountiful, immersive, and sometimes suffocatingly atmospheric music the duo purged out of the depths of self-induced delirium they so flagrantly sought, whatever the cost, for their bodies and mind. For example, the process for the recording of Love's Secret Domain, alliteration, LSD, that's not obvious enough for you, was fraught with unfettered LSD and cocaine consumption day after day in this recording studio that would persist until they reached the plane they felt they needed to tap into to produce the level of audio experience they deemed worthy of sharing with this world. During this period, Sleazy maintained his day job and was able to fund said record, because he was in the upper echelons of the music industry, while Jhon continued to get blasted till his knees buckled in the studio. It's funny, you can actually hear in one of the last songs on the album a recording of him going, "We've gone too far, we've gone too far, how do we get back, how do we get back?" So the experience was described as so draining that by the time they got to the titular song featured on the last album, the studio was occupied with Egyptian spirits, and the record studio had taken on a crypt-like, dusty appearance. Plus, Jhon couldn't be bothered to lift himself from the floor for that final title track recording, which is beyond impressive to me, as is by far the best track on the album. Window Pane is also a good one. Window Pane, if you're not, you know, if you know anything about acid, it used to be a little gel tab of acid you could get. I personally never come across it. It's very rare these days, but it was around back when they were recording this album. But yeah, so I think it's amazing that Jhon was able to sing this song that is so immensely powerful. It feels like it exists just for every other preceding song, uh, to just be there as a way of escalating, building momentum to the grand culmination, which is Love's Secret Domain. Now, if you thought the album and the live performances were jam-packed with abhorrent indulgences, then I implore you to view the music videos shot by Sleazy and featuring Jhon for the songs off this release title. Window Pane and the eponymous Love's Secret Domain. The former Jhon struggling to find balance upon a seemingly innocuous sandbar and window pane. Well, this was actually a rumored exchange point between the CIA and Indonesian cartels for opium way back when. The region itself is still purported to be rife with armed gangsters, and worse yet, especially for the ambitious thrill-seeking duo, was the presence of a massive, unrelenting quicksand, something they weren't warned about until after the shoot, if my memory serves. So, essentially, when you see Jhon kind of, struggling for balance in the video, that's because he's getting sucked down by this quicksand. But a couple other fun factoids. They named their albums Ape of Naples, Black Antlers, after names they assumed for various gay pornos, as the dreaded UK censor board at the time would allow for a cover of a gay porn and not the title to be shown. Makes sense. But I'm kind of glad they did that because, they got these great names out of it. And those names, Ape of Naples, Black Antlers, conjure up a litany of images. It is gay porn, right? These guys were very gay, as Nick Cave said. But they also made a mind-scalping album that simulates the audio of drugs like telepathine, the original Western name coined for ayahuasca, DOM, a Shulgin lysergamide that's close relative to DOB, and DOB for me. And I'm, about as seasoned and sane a psychonaut as I come. But DOB, I'd say, is, along with salvia, the only bad trip I've had because I was unable to take anything meaningful out of it whatsoever. And this stuff is about the same. It's like acid, but way stronger, and it lasts days. I guess, I just don't have, 1/10 the fucking pair of these hulking balls these guys sported. But, when this album really kicks off, I find, is when it segues into a strikingly accurate depiction of the exponentially escalating blast brought on by 5-MeO DMT. And of course, it all ends on a play with a oldie and a goodie, psilocybin or 4-HO-DMT. And now, personally, I think I've broken through on 5-MeO DMT. I remember doing it and everything going completely black, and it looked like there were kind of like reptiles slithering around in blackness, and it was one of those few highs I had to go, just breathe, it'll be over, but the way it, it began and just rose, just this steep incline, it just was captured so well. By their song on Time Machines, 5-MeO DMT, which is personally my favorite out of any of them. And I love this. That album, it comes with the inscription, compounds tested and retested by members of Coil. Now, there unfortunately isn't much footage of Jhon up there, but I do recall seeing him during a warm-up in the early 2000s, where his pupils are extremely dilated, which in conjunction with his slightly demented gestalt, had him looking just bloody possessed. But in his delirium, as he feverishly scrawled down lyrics on one page after another of the set list, he was also apparently attempting to find a means of transforming an egg slicer into a serviceable instrument, which, don't know about you, but to me, that alone really attests the musical ingenuity of the pair, plus the ability to not only think outside the box, but to think beyond boundaries imposed on all of our us normies in general. Now, no Coil video would be complete without me discussing Jhon's ultimately fatal alcoholism. I was introduced to the band by hearing about how Thomas Ligotti, a writer known for his penchant for antinatalist pessimistic musings, whose dreary novel, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, has long been one of my favorite cerebral and terminally depressed literary musings. And I think is probably the book that had the most inspiration behind Russ Cole's pessimistic philosophies, like anti-procreation philosophies and True Detective. I was looking into Thomas Ligotti, and I found that he played he played guitar as a benefit for an album that was supposed to fund Jhon's dependence on the bottle for relief so he could go to rehab, and hopefully get, healthy, release from his blazing derangement. Sadly, Jhon was an alcoholic most of his life, as according to Sleazy, they used to do a great deal of MDMA during the pure as can be jamboree that was the second summer of love, back when the M was legal and the teeth were grinding, as crowds of Gen Xers were bobbing to the bumping sound of fresh early house music. But pure or not, you do enough of the stuff and you'll have a hell of a come down on your hands. So Jhon, his means of dealing with this was to drown his hangovers in booze. Don't think I have to tell you why that's a bad idea. Well, after the passing of that glint of a generation, Jhon had become downright haunted by the things he saw and did. One day that just so happened to occur with Sleazy only a few rooms away, Jhon took his final plunge into the void, and all it took was a drunken spill from, get this, his second-story balcony to unspool that, seemingly invincible mortal coil once and for all. It's needless to say, it's a veritably anticlimactic end to a lunatic who was certainly, to quote Thompson, too rare to live and too rare to die. From anal guzzling of pure blood to scat being flung to and fro on stage, or defying the urgings of trigger-happy Indonesian drug dealers, not to mention the mass consumption of every drug known to man all at once, the fall of mirror meters was enough to topple the giant known as Jeff or Jhon Balance. Another brilliant spark of prodigious madness snuffed by the innocuous and utterly unpredictable. But his music lived on as Sleazy continued to push the boundaries of what defines tasteful art, with disturbing projects like Homeschool Boys Choir, a visual musical performance that portrayed an Indonesian tradition which saw young boys mutilating themselves to rid themselves of demons and vengeful sprites or spirits. A concept that has even made my stomach turn enough to stay clear of actually watching. Otherwise, Sleazy burned the last of his life's wick down quietly on the beaches of Indonesia until passing away himself of a far more mundane cause than his accomplice in putrid arms and, dare I say, secret lover Jhon. Now, I can't confirm or deny whether the two were lovers, but considering they're both very gay and very much, like, connected at the hip, it would not surprise me, but, you know, take that with a grain of, Adderall or whatever, right? Because that's just my speculation. That could be totally false. He expressed his contentment with Sleazy, anyways, with the rest of his life that he spent in Indonesia, as in his words, the veil between spirit and the world as we know it was much thinner in this region of the world, so he no longer felt the need to dose his way or drink his way into altered states, as nearly every cab driver in the area would tell him stories of how there were these phantoms of American tourists thought to have died in that terrible tsunami that happened back in the early 2000s, I believe, who would appear in the cab asking for a lift to the airport only to vanish upon arrival, seeking a way home. That was what they surmised. He said they were just more openly spiritual people. Now, I am paraphrasing his words because I watched the video where he said that a long time ago, but that's about the gist of his sentiment. And something about his demeanor upon expressing this tells me that his spirit, the spirit of Sleazy, is already home, and won't be desperately attempting to catch a flight back to his roots in the UK anytime soon. And knowing that brings me solace. And what would bring me more satisfaction would be to know that this video would help to promote the sordid legacy of this duo who lit their skulls on fire and painted the fleshy canvas that was their body. They displayed for our entertainment, and how that fire will continue to rage on unextinguished for new generations to burn to in kind. And with that, I bid you well, and I ask you that you share the good word of this unique and unchallenged musical behemoth with those you feel have the sensibilities tough enough to sustain the discord, simultaneous outrage they induced in generations that were never fully prepared for the powerhouse of queer oddities that is Coil in all their grotesque splendor. They exuded prolifically in the short time they were here, to be experienced like an unholy Eucharist. So open up, tune in, spiral out, and dive into the uncanny unknown. These frontiers they so graciously presented for our immoral predilections at the cost of sanity and life itself. May they not nor ever be forgotten as we go up, with fire in our minds and a window pane in our eyes. And with that, I bring you my tribute to Coil. I hope I didn't fuck up anything too much there. Anyways, if you like this, subscribe.